Hey everyone, today we're diving into the story of Joshua, a key figure in both the Bible and Islamic tradition. You might know him as the guy who took over after Moses, leading the Israelites into the Promised Land. But there's a lot more to his story, so let's break it down. Joshua, also known as Yehoshua, has a name that carries a deep meaning. In Hebrew, Yehoshua translates to Yahweh is salvation. Pretty powerful, right? Originally, his name was Hoshea, which simply means save. But Moses, seeing something special in him, gave him the name Yehoshua, or Joshua as we say in English today. Now, Joshua wasn't just any guy. He was born in Egypt before the famous Exodus. He started out as Moses' right-hand man, and when it was time to explore the land of Canaan, Joshua was one of the 12 spies sent to check it out. After Moses passed away, it was Joshua who stepped up to lead the Israelites, guiding them in their conquest of Canaan and divvying up the land among the tribes. According to the Bible, he lived during the Bronze Age and passed away at the ripe old age of 110. But Joshua's influence doesn't stop with the Bible. He's also respected in Islam, where he's known as Yusha bin Nun. He's seen as the faithful leader who took over after Moses, and some Islamic traditions even mention him in connection with the story of Moses meeting Khidr. And Joshua's story really picks up steam during the events of the Exodus. After the Israelites escaped from Egypt, Joshua played a major role in their first battle against the Amalekites at Rephidim. Moses put Joshua in charge of selecting and leading a militia for the fight, and with Joshua at the helm, the Israelites came out victorious. Joshua wasn't just a warrior though. He was right by Moses' side during some of the most crucial moments in the Bible. When Moses went up Mount Sinai to meet with God, Joshua accompanied him. He was there when Moses received the 10 Commandments, and when they came down from the mountain to find the Israelites worshiping the golden calf, Joshua witnessed Moses shattering the stone tablets in anger. In another key moment, while Moses was speaking with God in the tent of meeting outside the Israelite camp, Joshua was tasked with guarding the tent. However, when Moses returned to the mountain to carve the new tablets for the 10 Commandments, Joshua stayed behind as God had instructed that no one should accompany Moses this time. Joshua's loyalty and courage were further highlighted when Moses sent him as one of the 12 spies to scout out the land of Canaan. Out of the 12, only Joshua and Caleb returned with a positive report, believing that they could conquer the land with God's help. Because of their faith, they were the only 2 from their generation who were allowed to enter the Promised Land. After Moses passed away, God chose Joshua to lead the Israelites. God also blessed Joshua with a promise of invincibility throughout his lifetime, a pretty incredible guarantee. The first part of the book of Joshua details his leadership during the conquest of Canaan. One of the most famous events was when the Israelites crossed the Jordan River. The waters parted for them just as they had at the Red Sea. Their first battle after crossing the Jordan was the Battle of Jericho, where Joshua led the charge and brought down the city walls. However, their next battle, against the city of Ai, didn't go so smoothly. The Israelites were defeated, and it turned out it was because a man named Achan had taken something forbidden from Jericho. After Achan and his family were punished, Joshua led the Israelites to a successful victory over Ai. Joshua then faced an alliance of 5 Amorite kings who joined forces against Israel. During the battle at Gibeon, Joshua famously asked God to make the sun and moon stand still so they could finish the fight in daylight. According to the text, the sun stopped in the middle of the sky, giving the Israelites enough time to secure victory. This was such a unique event that it's noted as a day when God directly responded to a human's request in a way that hadn't happened before or since. With God's help, Joshua led the Israelites to numerous victories, securing much of the land of Canaan. He oversaw the distribution of land to the tribes at Gilgal and Shiloh, and was rewarded with the city of Timnath-Heres, where he eventually settled. As Joshua grew older, he called the Israelite leaders together and urged them to remain faithful to God and avoid mixing with the local populations, fearing it would lead them astray. In a final assembly at Shechem, Joshua made sure the people reaffirmed their commitment to serving God. To mark this, he set up a large stone as a witness to their promise. Shortly after, Joshua passed away at the age of 110 and was buried in Timnath-Heres in the hill country of Ephraim. And now let's dive into the historical aspect of Joshua's story. When it comes to the historical accuracy of the book of Joshua, many scholars have raised doubts. The mainstream view today is that the book of Joshua isn't necessarily a factual record of events. Although the story is set in the 13th century BCE, a time known for widespread destruction of cities, the archaeological evidence doesn't quite match up. The cities that the Bible links with Joshua, for the most part, don't show signs of being occupied or destroyed at the time the events were supposed to have happened. Because of this, some scholars suggest that the real value of the book of Joshua might not be in its historical content, but in its theological messages, what it teaches about God, and what those lessons would have meant to people living in the 7th and 6th centuries BCE. Richard Nelson, a biblical scholar, explained that during this period, there was a need for a unified story of Israel's origins. This narrative brought together different traditions, like the Exodus from Egypt, the belief in a national God as a divine warrior, and explanations for the ruins and social structures of the time. In essence, the book of Joshua might have been shaped by the political and religious needs of its time, particularly during the reign of King Josiah in the late 7th century BCE. Later revisions and additions likely occurred after significant events like the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and possibly even after the return from exile in 538 BCE. This would mean that the story we have now is a product of centuries of editing and reworking, influenced by the changing needs and circumstances of the Israelite people. Despite the historical debates, Joshua remains a highly respected figure in religious traditions. In Judaism, rabbinic literature paints Joshua as a humble and wise leader, deeply faithful and deserving of his role as Moses' successor. Various biblical verses are applied to Joshua to illustrate his virtues and the rewards he received because of them. For instance, he's seen as the embodiment of the verse, "He that waits on his master shall be honored," a reflection of his loyalty and service to Moses. There's also a tradition that says Joshua, when dividing the land of Canaan among the tribes, set certain conditions to ensure fair use of natural resources. These included the communal use of forests for grazing and fishing rights in the Sea of Tiberias. He made sure that natural springs could be used by all tribes for drinking and laundry, with the tribe where the water source was located having the first rights. This shows Joshua not only as a military leader, but also as someone who cared deeply about justice and the welfare of his people. Another fascinating tradition is that Joshua is credited with composing the Alenu prayer, a central prayer in Jewish worship, as the Israelites crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land. This prayer was meant to help the Israelites distinguish themselves from the surrounding nations by emphasizing their unique relationship with God. Today, religious Jews continue to recite this prayer 3 times daily, including during the high holidays. In Christianity, Joshua is often seen as a precursor or type of Jesus Christ. The New Testament draws parallels between Joshua leading the Israelites into the rest of Canaan and Jesus leading believers into God's ultimate rest. Early church fathers considered Joshua as a symbolic figure pointing toward Christ, emphasizing the spiritual continuity between the Old and New Testaments. Islamic tradition also holds Joshua in high regard, though he's not mentioned by name in the Quran. Instead, he's referred to in narratives that describe the conquest of Canaan, and as the young attendant of Moses during their journey to find Khidr. Muslim scholars and classical commentaries often view Joshua as a prophet and a faithful follower of God, praised for his role in the Israelite victories and his unwavering faith. One of the significant events from Islamic narratives is Joshua's prayer to God to stop the sun during a battle, a miracle similar to the one described in the Bible. This event is used in Muslim tradition to highlight Joshua's status as a prophet and his close relationship with God. So, While the historicity of Joshua's story might be debated, his significance across various religious traditions is unquestionable. His life and leadership continue to be a source of inspiration and a model of faithfulness and courage.